Yeah. Did my fair share of elm trees here. I think Jeff's calling this softball game. So, he just said we're live, so. Video's black, but. Amy. 'Cause we're live. So I don't know if that's just audio or not, but. YouTube. Let's pull it up real quick. Looks good. We're there.
It's really behind, but it's there.
7 o'clock, go ahead and call the meeting to order. If you could please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Jackie, you have the roll.
Yes.
Everybody's here, we have the form. Item C, adoption of the agenda. We've got several changes for tonight. First one is item F2. We'll add the additional list of bills that Jackie sent out late this afternoon. Let's see, item, under new business, item I on 2, we can scratch that tentative since we have the proposal in hand. So we'll consider FEH's proposal this evening. Under item 9B, so personnel and hirings, item 6, the TBD into Bethany Pulcher. And we will also add item 7, Miranda Merlee, first grade teacher. That it?
That's it. It should be in kind of that extra packet that I gave everybody, various additions.
Entertain a motion to adopt the agenda with those changes when you're ready.
So moved. I'll second.
Motion and second to adopt the agenda with the changes noted. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item D, public input on non-agenda items. Is there anybody that would like to speak tonight or reserve time for an agenda item? No? Okay. Moving on to item E, approval of minutes of past meetings. Just one meeting in there, right?
Yep.
No comments on those? I'll entertain a motion to approve when you're ready. So,
Second.
motion and second to approve the minutes of past meetings. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carried. Item F, approval of financial items, financial reports, summary list of bills, plus the additional list, and SBO report.
Start with the first page, the general fund report on page, it's really hard to read.
6.
6. And just gonna do something a little bit different, just so you can kind of see how it compares to last year. I know I have my running total, but you don't actually get to see the per month. So on the left side, under revenues, last year's total revenues for the month of May were $734,000. This year they're $783,000. I don't have a line by line item with that of why, but just to let you know that that's why, you know, your revenues are continuing to go up a little bit by little bit. as far as your cash. And so I'll report more on that after the fiscal year closes and I have all my accruals done. And then in the expenditure line, the total expenditures on the left-hand side were $734,000 this month, and last year at this time, they were $783,000. So all depends on timing and that kind of thing. But thought that was kind of interesting that basically last year revenues were down $40,000 from this year, and expenditures were up $40,000 from last year. So just kind of swapped each other out. But as you can see, cash is still up $753,000. Again, that has to do with our cash reserve that we were allowed to do in the budgeting year. In this next budgeting year, that is no longer. I think we were only allowed to do about 115, if I remember.
Sounds like it was somewhere in there.
It was down, and we did $500,000 to $600,000 in the past. So, and that's something that the state dictates. So, sort of keep that in mind as our cash balance goes down in the future. On the second page, under special revenue funds, management has $247,000 as of May 31st. Lisa will present some information to us tonight, and then we'll receive a bill. If you approve the coverages with her, we'll receive a bill most likely in July for an August payment, so that'll bring that down. But then we'll also send out $66,000 in retirement payments at the start of July for retirees and their investment balances. Physical plant equipment levy has a balance of $148,000. And I was gonna look. And last year at this time, almost identical. So we kind of just take in our PEPA levy and we expel our PEPA levy each year. We kind of maintain a balance. So that's good to know as we're planning ahead for these capital projects, that's kind of where we've maintained because of expenses throughout the year. We use that for our one-to-one initiative. We use that for kind of all of our other little miscellaneous capital outlay throughout the year. Playground equipment recreation levy, we have a balance of $87,000. And last year about this time, a little bit more than that because we did have a larger expenditure out of the Pearl levy this year with our contribution to the playground out at the softball complex. And under save, we have a little over $1 million in save, and as of July 1st, there's a $248,000 principal and interest payment that's due. So that'll bring that down by that dollar amount on your next board packet. And last year about this time, we had, again, almost, no, that's incorrect. That one I need to pull back up. So we have, like I said, a little over $1 million with a $248,000 payment that's coming due. So those are those balances as we enter the new year that we can continue to monitor, knowing we have those large capital outlays waiting to happen. So on the next page, activity fund. Activity fund is probably the lowest balance that we've had in some time, and that's just because of our successes for this last year. So we just need to kind of look at that going forward and how we'll creatively finance things as they come up, but we still have a pretty significant balance. But that is the lowest that we've had in quite some time. Hot lunch fund, $394,000 to start, $421,000 to end. I know there's a pretty large expense in the board packet this month to get a steamer, and you have to remember we did have 2 years of no paid lunches by students. It was just all federal dollars, so we were probably getting more than what we would collect from students, so those balances did increase. And we'll look at how we're going to spend those in the future. Student construction, negative $51,000. We're going to have to make a transfer, basically lend that fund some money as we go into our next fiscal year, and then I can pay it back. I just can't close out with a negative balance.
You have to do that out of the general fund?
Most likely, just because it is instruction. That's probably where I'll do it from. But that's something that I'm still kind of thinking where that's going to come from. FFA farm fund, and that might be something I call our new auditor about because she might have a different opinion. FFA farm fund, $4,300, pretty self-maintaining fund out there. They have been making some improvements, so bringing dollars in and putting dollars out. And then our split fund, which is what we use for insurance costs. So That's what I have to report on the financial report. If there's any specific questions, and then again, list of bills is several pages long. I sent out a small list this morning, or this afternoon.
One thing I'll note is the balance with the hot lunch fund, that's gonna come up in our discussion later today with how flush it is at 420,000, so keep that in mind. If there aren't any questions for Jackie,
One question on the list of bills.
Mm-hmm.
It's noted as page 3 of the bills themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Recover Health of Iowa, 13,000 and change. Is that for a special ed student?
So we have a particular special ed student that has, in addition to a para, has a one-to-one nurse aide.
But that first I was thinking about our school nurse.
Yep.
right?
No, we have a separate contracted nurse for that student.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Any other questions for Jackie? Brent, you want to introduce Lisa?
Yes, we've got Lisa Deeren here with us tonight from Frontier Insurance. She also placed a packet for our property casualty, workman's comp insurances. In the packet a little bit later, there's kind of a side-by-side comparison as well, but thank Lisa for coming in, and I'll kind of turn it over to her, kind of run through our policies and answer any questions that the board might have.
And I think this year, the only new member we have is Amy, and I'm expecting with her grandma, she's taught her everything she knows about insurance, so this will be a breeze for you. I'd like to open up the packet, and you can see I have both years listed here for 2022, and then starting our new year of 23 here, where we'll go into from July 1 of 22 to July 1 of 23. The very first page you'll see is our property coverage, and I'll go through these, each separate item. I'll let you go through and summarize within each policy, but I'll kind of just bring to note some things that have maybe changed this year within those individual lines. For the property coverage, last year, if you remember, we changed the deductible to $5,000. It used to be $2,000 before that. We did keep that the same this year. We were told that all of the buildings would have a 7% increase in their value. That didn't happen according to what I figured. They came through, they went through what our buildings are as far as square footage. Not all of them changed their values. So you can see we went from 32 million up to about 34 million in coverage this year. That's the difference there. I'm sure you all know the rising cost of products is why they're raising those, and you'll actually notice that on your own homeowner. They're increasing those property values for your own personal insurance as well. Other than that, everything basically stayed the same on this page as far as coverages. And we've added some things throughout the year, and that's listed in here as well on the New Year's renewal. So you can see the premium difference at the bottom. It's gonna go from 42 to 59,000 on that line. The next page, really there haven't been any differences here with our pollution liability coverage or the crime coverage. Pollution liability, basically that's through the state of Iowa. Everyone has kind of come up with this in case there'd ever be that issue where we would be liable for any pollution damages around our area. The crime coverage, that's going to cover a lot of your different booster clubs, the athletic boosters, music boosters. Those are all included within that. And there was a premium increase on that coverage for the crime, and that was just a company-wide increase there. The next page is our general liability coverage. Basically, this is determined on the number of staff and also based on each occurrence limit. We have $2 million in place for our general liability, and that's going to also cover any damages to rented premises, any personal or advertising injuries, and then we have a deductible of $1,000 in this area. And then every year Jackie gives me the numbers of the student and staff, and then those are entered in to kind of come together with the final numbers. And this is also basically a company-wide premium increase on this line as well. So it went from 10,000 up to 12. The next page is the public officials and employment practices. This basically covers you as a board. This is going to be any claims made against the school district, board members, or employees. Now, one thing we did to try and offset some of our premium increases this year is we used to be at $1,000 deductible. We're going to increase this to $5,000, and that actually saved us about $2,000 in premium a year. And knock on wood, we have yet to turn in a claim in this, so we're hoping that this is a smart move for us, but I think we'll be fine. On the bottom, you have the workers' compensation coverage. The main thing for this is our experience mod factor. That's taken the last 3 years and determined that experience mod based off the number of claims that we have with our employees. And you can see that we've gone down again this year, so this has helped us tremendously. We've had very little for claims, and it's great that we're down to 0.71. It lowered our annual premium by a lot, so this really saved us in our premium this year. And I did include at the back of the packet, there's gonna be some losses that you can look through and see for each of these things that we turned claims in for the last year. The following page is our automobile coverage. This will remain the same this year as far as coverage limits. Really, this can change throughout the year depending on the types of vehicles that we're getting in to insure. And one thing I want to note under here is that all glass is covered under the policy, whether you have comp coverage or not, so that's a nice thing to have. And really not too much of an increase on the automobile here. And the bottom is the umbrella coverage. This is everything that goes above and beyond our liability. An umbrella will cover everything, whether you're in a car or it's a property damage or something where someone gets hurt on the property. This covers above that in case the district is sued. We are going to increase this from 3 million to 5 million this year. And the reason we're doing this, if you'll go to the following page, we used to belong to a group excess liability that was through the IASB, and you had a group of the different schools that could go together and use this excess liability. Well, they are dropping that coverage down. The last year, they've lost so much money with this type of coverage with the claims that these districts have had. They've had to drop this down from 15 million to 10 million. And we decided it would be in our best interest to increase this from 3 million to 5 million so we're not losing that extra umbrella coverage. And that was what I believe a lot of school districts were gonna do this year to help make up that difference there.
So what types of claims were made in that area? What types of instances?
They're still actually recovering from derecho and a tornado and things like that. And that there was 2 really bad bus accidents, one where a child was killed in a bus accident, and a lot of that excess was used for that liability for that district. And then the final thing is our cyber liability. This is actually a adjuster plan that we take that insures against telephone hacking, phishing, multimedia liability. And we're gonna look into having them come to the school district and do some different tests with the system and work with Curtis. I've reached out to someone on it, and that is some stuff that they can do for us to kind of help get more data on what we might be missing in that area, if anything, or how they can help us combat some of those people that are out there trying to get into our emails and get our data, so. So at the end of the day, I was expecting a 20% increase in our insurance policy this year from last year from all the meetings and stuff I went to, but it ended up being just around 12% increase this year. And if you'd like to take a look on the following pages, these are all our losses that we've had in the last 3 years. And you can see that, you know, we had a wind loss where a trailer was parked in the lot and the wind blew it into a vehicle. And then a lot of these auto claims are basically windshields. We don't have too much other than that at this time. And then after the auto is the work comp. And really, we haven't had too much. We had, you know, a couple of slips and falls like we normally do. And you can see that they're listed under the claim detail, the different items that have happened. But really, we're not doing too bad. And then the final page has the property losses. And we just basically had the scoreboard is really all we had to recover for a claim there. Does anyone have any questions for me on any of this? We did look at some different deductibles. I had them run different deductibles for like the automobiles and different things like that, but you were only saving like $200 a year to change deductibles. And there really wasn't any cost effectiveness to doing that.
So 161, 263, that's the number?
Correct.
Any questions for Lisa? All right, thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
Okay, so we'll act on that later under new business, but when you're ready, I'd entertain a motion to approve those list of financial items.
Make the motion to approve those list of financial items, including the additional list of bills.
Second.
A motion and second to approve the list of financial items, including the list of additional bills. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item G, administrative reports, discussion items. Mr. Jordan.
Yeah, so I've got the student, staff, and community recognition in the stack of documents I provided to you. So most of these have been reported on already in the paper, but we want to congratulate Easton Radke. Easton was the state champion, we could say, for the VFW Auxiliary Essay Contest. So congratulations to him. We had our own local competition that he was kind of the winner, but then kind of runner-up is listed in that second bullet. Baylor Hofert and Jackson Van Veldhuizen was kind of our local third place finisher. So we want to congratulate those three students, but also Ms. Fixaman and Mrs. Meyer for spearheading that. Anything to add?
We've only won it twice, and that's been the last 2 years. How many years they've done the VFW, so it's great. Step up. Very proud of them.
And then obviously, since we met back in May, the girls golf team advanced to the state tournament. They finished third overall. So we want to congratulate the team, Coach Gerlman, but then also the individual scores are also listed there. So 76 1A girls competed, and all 6 of ours that made the trip were in the top half of the state meet. So tip our cap to them. We also want to congratulate the track athletes. This was also in the paper, but just kind of recapping, I listed there where each of those either relays or medleys or individuals finished, and they're down at the state track meet. If you flip that document over, on the back is our staff recognition. You may have seen Sarah Brown was selected as the MIC Teacher of the Month by the Sioux Center McDonald's, nominated by parent Carrie Jurens. And you can see her quote there in regards to Sarah's work with the Kindness Squad in 4th grade, which we heard from a few months ago. Also want to recognize Ann and Sherwin Langholt for their work preparing and then ultimately chaperoning the band and choir students. I don't know if all 85 students went, but there was 85 on their list that they gave us right before they left. But then we also want to recognize the 8 other chaperones that I've listed there. Christy Alton Osmera, Leslie Benz, Melissa Harms, Jill Jansma, Jessica Jensen, Nadia Curley, Jen Miss, and Marcia Techen. Okay. So they rode the bus, stayed in the hotels, supervised the kids every place they went, so.
I mean, it was a great experience.
Yeah, it was a great experience. Memories for a lifetime for the 85 students that participated. So we also want to thank Kathy Van Berkom. Kathy, as you know, retired as a Central Lyon teacher a few years ago, but after she completed her long-term sub for Mrs. Metzger this spring, she let us know that she is done. So she's not going to sub any longer. Kathy's very willing, doesn't matter if you're a preschool student or preschool classroom or all the way through high school, she's subbed every different level. So she'll be missed. She'll still be around, obviously, got grandkids in the system, but she said her working days are done. She's looking forward to time at the lake and just doting on her grandkids. And then it is obviously baseball and softball season, so we want to give a shout out to Bruce Eckenrod, his wife Rachel, and then Jeff Jager for all their work at the fields. You know, this morning they were up early checking the weather after 2 inches of rain last night, and got them playable by this afternoon for the games going on right now. So we want to make sure we recognize them. Anybody else you guys want to give a shout out to?
I do have one that I was going to do in my report and I forgot about it. I was going to let everyone know to recognize Rhonda Groen and Lisa Krull at Frontier Bank. They did a bit of a heads up move for us this last month. I had an email hack happen, and that's one of the things that Lisa's talking about with the crime, the cyber policy. Rhonda called me and said, did you request a wire for $30,000 to a certain bank account name? And I said, no, I did not. And she said, okay, because it came from your email address, your school email address. So I went to Curtis and Jeff, and we actually looked in my sent items in their back room folder, and it was there. So someone literally mirrored my name, my image, my email, everything, and sent a request to wire funds. So just want to shout out to them to take extra time to make sure that businesses are doing those requests. And so we've now implemented a couple 2-step authentic verifications, so that won't happen again, hopefully. But we've had it happen with direct deposit requests internally, where I've received direct deposit changes from staff, and it looks like that's coming straight from their emails, but nothing from me to a financial institution yet. So that was a new one. So
It's real.
That training will be good. Paul and I can speak to that, but we get simulated phishing emails from our company all the time, and
Yep.
sure enough, we don't always have a 100% passing rate. So it just takes one to lock down an entire network. So that's really good that Lisa brought that up, that I encourage you to get that done.
Communications, I guess I'm skipping ahead here. I just got my first notification for annual convention, November 16 and 17. So if anybody's interested, just let me know, we can get you signed up. And then I'm gonna pass this around. We just got confirmation the end of last week. Central Lyon, along with a host of other schools from Northwest Iowa, were awarded the Teacher and Para-Educator Registered Apprentice Program. So what this is going to ultimately support our students, number one. If they want to obtain their para-educator certification, this will help offset any of their costs that might be associated with it. You can take those para-educator classes through the AEA or through Northwest Community College. And then for any of our paras that are interested in becoming teachers, it will also pay for their coursework. So this is as you can see here, the schools in Northwest Iowa, we estimated could be upwards of $6 million for folks that are interested in this. And so now we get to go about hammering out what those details are and trying to recruit current staff members or current students to join us in this process. So kind of the kids that we're targeting are, Christy's already teaching some foundations of education courses. So when they come back to school in the fall, having that conversation with those group of kids that either might have already taken that class with her, or those kids that are taking it this next year or the year after. It's a 2-year pilot. And then we'll have conversations when we come back to school with our current paras, if anybody's interested in going down that path. And so later in our agenda tonight, Kyra Waletich, you have her resignation. My hope is, since we were awarded this, we might be able to get her like a paid student teaching experience, like a paid internship, instead of like all of us that are educators right now, that's just been always a part of our program. We've never been paid for that time. So now that we've been awarded this, the Iowa Department of Workforce Development is the one that manages it, not the Department of Education. So I'm be involved in a series of webinars to really get the details that then we can turn around and promote it with our kids and our staff members. So we were the second largest grant awardee across the state. There was one other one that was about $6.5 million. So consortium of students here in Northwest Iowa working together to try to create a pipeline of future educators and meet the need of that kind of hard to fill teaching positions that we're seeing is only getting harder in the last couple of years.
So did you say this is a 2-year?
2-year pilot program. So again, federal dollars using to fund it for 2 years. And then depending upon the success or hopefully it's continued and funded by the state after those first 2 years. So those are the communications that I have.
Moving on to item number 3, looks like Dan's not here.
Yeah, so Paul's joining us to kind of talk about girls wrestling. I'm just going to give you an overview. In your packet, again, on your desk, I gave you some charts and graphs based upon a survey that I put out across Northwest Iowa. We had 19 schools respond. But as we've been talking internally about girls wrestling, now that it's been sanctioned for the 22-23 school year, we sat down last week with the wrestling coaching staff and kind of talked about what would this look like for Central Lyon. And our conversation centered around really 5 big ideas. Number 1, participation. So we've had conversations with kids, with girls in high school specifically. We had 20 girls that showed up to a meeting, followed up that meeting with a sign up with Jeff Jager. We had 12 girls that have signed up that said that they're committed to going out for next season. So that's really led us down this planning process. Second big thing is, what are we gonna do about coaching? Had a conversation with our current high school boys coaching staff, and in a perfect world, we'd love to hire, somebody to be the face of the program, a head girls coach, knowing that there may or may not be interest in the community when it comes to taking that position on. But I think through our conversations, if it's somebody that's currently on staff that's maybe an assistant, maybe it's a current middle school wrestling coach, we feel like there's probably somebody on staff or somebody in the community that's ready to step forward and kind of lead this program. But during this planning process that we're in right now, Paul, Curtis, and the other coaches in the program have really been planning and developing that plan. When it comes to assistant coaches, we're kind of thinking the current coaching staff that we have right now would probably be those assistant coaches. And then depending upon how many girls ultimately do go out next year would determine where we would be at and whether or not we'd have to identify a second person as an assistant coach. Third big idea is practices. Where's the location, what time are they gonna practice? And I think this was the kind of the priority of the coaching staff, is that in order to maximize the coaches, the adults, we really wanna practice at the same time. Instead of a early practice and a late practice like our girls and boys basketball teams do, to maximize the coaches that we currently have, their recommendation is we're practicing at the same time. So if we're adding 10 to 15 more participants to the wrestling program, but in girls, we're gonna have to kind of think creatively about the spaces. The current wrestling room, we've got about 40 guys that are in there each night, an additional 4 to 5 coaches. So if we're adding 10 to 15 additional people, we're gonna spill out of that room. So that's where we ultimately have to decide, are we gonna use the mezzanine space, are we gonna use the PE gym here? That means rolling out mats each night. And then ultimately, are the girls just practicing in that space, or are we kind of getting creative with freshmen or JV wrestlers going to a different spot, but the girls staying in the wrestling room, or how does the logistics of that work out? The other option is, with our sharing agreement with George, if this is something that we want to continue down that path, and I think the coaches would be definitely in favor of extending that offer to GLR, that would open up space over at George, because especially in the fall up until Christmas break, there isn't wrestling going on at George. Middle school boys don't start till after Christmas break. So that first kind of 8 weeks of the season, we would have some additional flexibility, but traditionally we've had 20 to 25, maybe even 30 middle school 7th and 8th grade boys that once the calendar turns to January, then our space even becomes a little bit more challenging. Meets is the fourth big one. The calendar for girls wrestling starts 2 weeks earlier, so think November 1st instead of the middle of November. So this is another kind of challenge if it's a current member of the boys coaching staff that maybe becomes the head coach. Many of our football coaches are also wrestling coaches. And so if they're trying to balance the end of the football season, especially if we're playing well and we're playing in the postseason, that becomes an additional demand or challenge for us when it comes to the start of the season. So if we starting 2 weeks early, the girls' state tournament will be at the end of January. So the season will end by February. And again, there's limited schools that have already committed to hosting meets. And athletic directors across all Northwest Iowa are trying to figure out when's the best time to have our meets. Do we just have some girls wrestle before the varsity matches that typically happen Tuesdays and Thursdays? Do we add a girls division on the nights that are JV wrestles? Usually typically maybe Monday nights or Friday nights. In addition to, there's a couple girls tournaments that are already on the schedule, but they're a little bit further away. It's like Spencer, Sioux City. There's not a lot of girls tournaments already scheduled across the Siouxland Conference or the Lakes Conference or the War Eagle Conference. And then the fifth big item is a junior high program. Currently, we've got a handful of girls that wrestle in our youth Lion's Den program. But again, talking to the coaching staff, if we want to do this the right way, in our opinion, when we start our girls 9 through 12 program, we probably should be starting the same time with a junior high program. So the rules allow us to have junior high girls and high school girls practice together at the same time. They can wrestle against each other during practice, they just can't compete against one another in meets. Similarly, girls can be in the same room as boys for practice. You can practice against a boy, you just can't wrestle in a meet against a boy, and that's for 7th through 12th grade. So it's not uncommon up until this year, or until the 22-23, for girls to wrestle boys. That can't happen any longer, 7th through 12th grade. Since it's officially sanctioned, girls have to wrestle girls, boys have to wrestle boys. So that's kind of where we're at in the planning process. You know, next steps for us, I think, is we need to get back together with GLR and have a conversation with the two sharing committees about what's a path forward together. Wrestling coaches are willing to join us with that conversation and have those discussions about the logistics, especially around practice, and developing, in our opinion, our recommendation, a 7 through 12 program so that we really build this from the ground up instead of creating this gap in the middle school. So those are kind of our big 5 talking points. Paul, anything you want to add? Anything maybe I missed?
No, I think you covered it. Good summary. Yeah, nothing really to add. Just appreciate the administration, Mr. Dorff and Mr. Cruz sitting down with the coaches, and I think we're all on the same page. If we're gonna do it, let's do it the right way and be successful. Otherwise, you're gonna have a hard time keeping this group of coaches involved. We're not gonna be involved with something that's, you know, not fully supported, not done right, so. And I think we're all on the same page there, so appreciate them sitting down with us and walking through in detail, at least the initial steps, so.
So I guess our hope is when we meet in July, we'll have a recommendation about the program, changes or revisions to the sharing agreement, so that then we can begin to advertise for a coach. You know, I really believe we got to find the right adult to be the champion for the program. They're going to create the enthusiasm. They're going to be the connection with the kids and the families. So we want to identify a high-quality coach. It's going to be working closely with the current boys coaching staff to work out the logistics on a day-to-day basis about practice and meets and all the kind of unseen things that go on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, if anybody wants to discuss any of it here in the next month or for the next board meeting, feel free to reach out to me or any of the coaches really.
So thank Paul, Curtis. They've been talking a lot about it since the girls athletic union sanctioned it at their unofficial state meet this last winter. So just
Just out of curiosity, like what are the weight classes like? Are there as many for girls as boys, or are there fewer spots to fill, or?
Yeah, so I think they have released guidelines for the girls' season. I believe it's 12 weight classes instead of 14.
Okay, just a couple less.
But,
That's
yeah.
all. Just curious.
You know, we have opened up, we do an open mat Sunday nights and started for 2 weeks, and we have 5 girls in there Sunday, high school girls, 4 girls, so I mean, there's definitely interest. They're showing up, working hard here this summer, so I think there are at least a handful that seem like they're definitely committed to wanting to do the season, so.
So again, if you're referring to what I gave you here in the packet, 19 responses. I think I sent this to about, Northwest AEA has about 70 schools, so less than, a third of the schools responded to the survey. But we're kind of in that second tier of anticipated participation. Lamar's is down the road, they're obviously a little bit bigger than us. But schools our size, Sergeant Bluff, Luton, if you're looking kind of at the last couple pages, Westwood, Ridgeview, we're in that kind of 10 to 20 kids anticipated, but the majority is they're anticipating 1 to 5 girls wrestlers. So there'll be some growing pains with it, but over time, I'd say 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we're gonna have really healthy numbers for girls. And that's where I think when we come back with a recommendation, don't be surprised to see a 7th through 12th grade plan for middle school and high school. We just gotta continue our conversations with not only the members of the Siouxland Conference, but of the 27 schools in the Siouxland, the War Eagle, and the Lakes Conference, so that we get on the same page about schedules and meets, so that we have a legitimate schedule and we don't have to drive to Fort Dodge or to Council Bluffs or parts further east to get our girls' matches.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Paul. Item 4, principals. Jason, do you have anything? Steve?
Just like to say the end of the year went very smooth for the school, and Jim Wishman was excellent for the staff. They had a great last day in service along with our social emotional learning the other 2 days, so it really came together, and thank Mr. Dorff for all his work on that, and Jason too, to line up the speakers, so real good.
Very good. Superintendent report, Mr. Dorff.
Yeah, page 20 in the packet is just an updated spreadsheet from our conversations as a Buildings and Grounds Committee with FEH last week. Again, if you remember, we just decided to kind of move forward with the maintenance building. If you've driven down by the activity center, you know that old garage has been demolished. We're just waiting on the supplies to come in, and Grant Engel and Steve Bresky and some of our Buildings and Grounds staff will begin to tackle that project once we have all those supplies. And then in the packet, you have the proposal for FEH to support us with the middle school bridge project. So again, we're gonna cash flow both of those, estimating about $115,000. As Jackie noted, between Pepple and Save right now, we got about $1.2 million. Okay, so easily can accomplish both of those projects with our cash, in addition to any of our expenses that we've got planned for next school year. But our real conversation centered around the summer 2023 projects that we've already studied, and really try to kind of cluster those. So projects 1 through 3, which entail a total of 5 projects, is what FEH is really gonna help us with. And Matt Basie from FEH is going to try to get back to us here in July, no later than the middle of August, with a really more definitive estimate on the costs of those 5 projects. In a perfect world, he would have something to us by the fall, so that then we can make a decision about how much we need to approve for a save bond, so that we can then go to bid either late fall, early winter, to try to get on people's schedules for next year. And again, he just cautioned, the construction industry is just really difficult to put numbers to right now. Just like he had told us when we went through the study. It's not any better today than it was when he was here in March. And there's no guarantee that there's gonna be any more resolution by this fall. So he said he'll do the best he can, and then ultimately, we'll just see how it plays itself out. Numbers 4 and 5 there are projects that we're gonna engage with DGR for the parking lots. And Matt's like, he could help us, but he's like, you don't need to pay me to do that, you got them here in town. Just engage with them, kind of cut him out as the middleman. And then similar type of process for the auditorium stage floor. Steve Bresky, you probably smelled the oil in the air when you walked in, that's because they're resurfacing the gym floor. So we're talking to that company about helping us with the auditorium project. So then Steve would maybe act as kind of the general contractor. And again, whether it's Grant Engel next summer or another local contractor would help us with those projects. Matt said he could advise or answer questions as we go through it, but he's like, he doesn't need to be involved in that. He thinks we can move forward by ourselves. And then the future projects are really an extension of the work that he's already done around classroom upgrades. In our perfect world, we would do, next summer, we'd do kind of that first floor kindergarten, first grade classrooms of the 68 building, not only the cabinetry, but the windows. The year after, kind of the second floor, 2nd through 4th grade, and then the year after that, the 5th and 6th grade preschool classrooms. Now, he did talk, to us a little bit about, if we're doing windows, it might be better for us to do all the windows at one time. That way you get the same materials, you get one contractor that's working on all that. We'll just kind of see how it plays itself out. Carrie, Scott, anything to add? I appreciated Matt, working through and getting this proposal tonight, turn it around so we can get going on it, so.
One question.
Yep.
Are you concerned about the timing in terms of, that's a lot of projects to do next summer? Like 4 or 5 all at the same time, essentially. That's a lot to manage, it seems like to me.
Yep, so in a perfect world, we'd get going on the bus barn as soon as the snow melted and we could get into the ground. And that's why I listed that kind of on its, as number 1. Kind of felt like that's a big enough project that would have its own contractor, maybe its own set of subcontractors, as compared to 2A, 2B, 2C, that would maybe be its second project, maybe bid all at the same time, because it felt like it might be able to combine contractors on that one. And then the classroom upgrades would be kind of a third smaller project. Again, whether it's a local contractor that would need to work with FEH on the design and the plans, but he was pretty confident that we could tackle all 3 next summer. And where they're at within the building and the community.
Yeah, they can kind of go on at the same time. And I think just like you said, just like the bus barn is just its own thing. So it doesn't really affect the playground or that, it's separate, has its own contractor. And that's kind of how the one is 1, 2, 3. They're just kind of 3 separate.
My concern is more of your time probably in managing all 3 of those at the same time.
I think we can do it, yeah.
Okay.
Ask me September of 2023, but
Okay.
we'll try to tackle them. I have a lot of confidence in Matt. I mean, I feel really good about the way he's led us through this process, and his communication's been really, really good.
And I think we need to keep in mind, I think one of the things he said, when we can go out for bid, it still might not happen. So the sooner, the better to at least get the options. I think he talked about somewhere where they bid it and it still didn't happen for,
Cherokee, for example.
that's what it was, yeah, it didn't even start to happen for 18 months later. So,
Windows being the supply chain problem, you know, they
Yeah, there's a
wanted.
challenge in getting products right now.
Exactly.
so even if we do it, go out for bid, it still might get delayed. So that's maybe one of the reasons to just get going on it.
Yeah, that doesn't mean we have to necessarily do all of them, when they say, well, let's do this one or not that one.
Especially if costs come in higher than we anticipate too, so.
Costs are very high right now.
Yep. But yeah, I guess I think between Mr. Bresky and Mr. Jorth, I'm pretty confident in that they can handle it as well.
Okay.
Anything else, anyone?
That's what I've got.
Okay. Board committees, item 6. Anybody have anything? Okay, I've got a couple things. Brett, I think Amy and I are on the policy committee, is that right?
Yep.
Had a couple things come up, if you want to try and schedule a meeting for us
Mm-hmm.
sometime in the next couple of weeks, and we can talk about those at the policy committee and see whether or not they need to be addressed at the full board level, but you could do that. The second thing is, so we had our, let's see, it would be our monthly agenda review meeting with Dave, Brent, and myself on Thursday of last week, and traditionally we have either had that meeting on Wednesday or Thursday before the packets come out, and then the packets come out on Thursday or Friday. So we've had just, and I think it's been that way since I've been on the board, just kind of that general time frame, right?
Mm-hmm.
Fair, okay. So we've had some initial discussion about potentially moving that up earlier in the week, just in an attempt to potentially get the packet out a little sooner. I know that's going to create some additional stress for some, including Jackie, so we'll want her in on that conversation on whether or not we can make that happen with timing of bills and everything else. But I just wanted the board to know that that is a conversation we're having to see if we can get the packet in everybody's hands just a little bit sooner, even if it's a day or two. So, anything to add there, guys?
And really, the intention of that is to allow us more time to review it, more time to ask questions back to Brent, Jackie, whoever else, so that we don't have surprises at board meetings and things like that.
Yeah, and I think for the most part, if everyone else around the table is as busy as I am on the weekend, Saturday and Sunday are kind of out. So if you're not going to get to it until Thursday or Friday, you're probably not going to be able to get knee deep into it until Monday. So we'll just, more to come on that hopefully.
Yeah, the only
Go
thing.
digital in July?
Yep, so at our July meeting, Assembly will provide us a 30-minute crash course on this is how we access the online materials. You know, the first couple will continue to provide paper packets for anybody who wants a paper packet. And then you'll get to see how both, and then ultimately transition to just the electronic version a couple months down the road. So,
See how it goes. All right. We don't have anything under H under old business, so we'll move on to new business. I. First item, number 1, consider school nursing services contract with Health Services of Lyon County for 2022-2023.
So page 21 has the memo. As you can see there, it's an increase of about $13,700. Again, this year, like the last 2 years, Nurse Brenda has been here the entire time our kids are here, 8 o'clock to 3:45, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and then 8 to 2:30 on Wednesday, so 35 hours a week. Health Services has basically supplemented those hours, haven't charged us for the total hours, so that's why there's a $13,000 increase, because Melissa's budget, like most of our budgets, is at a point where she needs to balance those books a little bit more. So that's why it's a significant increase there. I think we're maybe getting to a point where we need to really examine that relationship, and maybe it's more cost-effective for us to employ our own nurse and not partner, but that's something that we'll continue to examine over this next year, and I'll continue to have conversations with Melissa. Again, love Nurse Brenda. Can't imagine these last 2.5 years without her here every day. And so definitely my recommendation is to approve it, even though there is an increase in those costs for those services.
Any questions on that? I think that's still pretty reasonable, considering they still float the bill for continuing ed and everything else, which, you know, the healthcare field's gonna, it's gonna add up pretty quickly. when you do that.
Yep.
Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion to approve when you're ready.
Make a motion to approve the healthcare services contract with Lyon County.
Second.
A motion and second to approve the school nursing services contract, health services Lyon County for next year. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Item 2, consider middle school bridge construction project design proposal from FEH.
So that was on your tables as you came in, page 3 of the additional items I provided. You can see the scope of the work. Time frame is in the middle of that front page. So again, design documents completed by mid-July, proposals for a contractor by the end of July, and then hopefully construction starting in August, and then concluding by the time the snow flies. Again, this is another project that we're a little late on, so we're hoping to get a contractor to tackle this project, but if we can't identify one, at least we'll have the design and the plans, and we'll be able to move on it next spring. So ideally, it's done this fall. In a worst-case scenario, it's next summer.
Are you concerned with that entrance being closed off for the half of the year?
No, so we've got access, whether it's the, through the weight room doors or the preschool doors. Fire marshal says we're fine during construction. If we don't have that immediate access for the 7th and 8th grade wings, we're well within our parameters to evacuate during an emergency to those other 2 exits. There's not a lot of foot traffic right now, other than staff at the beginning of the day. And then there's a few kids that go out that door at the end of the day, but during the winter, we don't exit at all that direction anyways. It's really only when we have a fire drill, we send in multiple kids and staff members out that direction.
Yeah, I didn't know how much it was actually used on a daily basis, so it's not much then.
Yeah, it's not very frequent.
Any other questions on that? I'll take a motion when you're ready.
So moved.
A motion and second to approve the proposal from FEH for the middle school bridge construction project. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Item number 3, consider property casualty and workman's compensation insurance for next year from EMC/Frontier.
That's what we heard from Lisa. Her packet, I was off about $4,000 on my total. I wasn't able to catch the specific line item, but as she noted, it's about a 12% increase in totality of the policy, which 12% is $17,000. but maybe better than 20% like she had kind of warned us. So it's mine and Jackie's recommendation to move forward with the policy as she submitted. And like Andy had identified, the total was 161,263.
With CPI of about 8.6% from last May, and insurance companies aren't in this to lose money, so
Yep.
they get claims, premium costs can go up. So. Entertain a motion. Are you ready?
I'll make a motion to approve the bid from Frontier Insurance.
Second.
We have a motion and second to approve the property casualty and workers' comp insurance from EMC for next year. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Item 4, consider equipment maintenance insurance for 2022-2023.
So this policy is through specialty underwriters. If you remember, we added this policy 2 years ago. Try to provide you a summary of what those rates have been the last couple years. This year's increase is to 77,704, primarily because our usage is up this year. So we've had more claims. And again, we met today, Curtis, Jeff, and I, and we're continuing to submit claims through the end of June. So that's where I'm estimating we're going to be somewhere above $50,000 in probably claims. And that's where the renewal adjustment comes in. And then equipment additions that we're adding are our copy machines. So as the page 29 notes there, it includes those items, drums, cartridges, whether it's toner cartridges, whether it's the kits that are the internal components of the copier, we'll get reimbursement for those. So even though, again, we're talking about a little over $1,000 in increase, I think the policy, we're learning how to use it more. And so we're taking more advantage. So not only is it the equipment itself, but we can also get reimbursed for Curtis and Jeff's time if they're fixing a computer or any tech equipment, or Steve Bresky or any of his staff members, we can get reimbursed for their time if they're trying to repair any of our equipment that's listed on that page 30. So if we can't fix it, we call somebody else in, and any of those fees from an outside vendor, we can get reimbursement for. If they can't fix it, then they give us a cash out option. So again, that's where we've done a little bit better this year. And again, their goal is about a 80 to 90% usage rate, and we're above that this year. Where last year we were well below the usage rate, and that's why they dropped us from over $80,000 our first year that we had the policy. So again, this comes out of management. Any of the savings that, that $50,000 in savings is general fund savings.
Any questions on that? Was that entertain a motion over it?
Second?
Motion and second to approve the equipment maintenance insurance for $77,704 for next year. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Item 5, consider milk and bread bids for next year.
So the next kind of middle section of the packet has a memo from Darcia in addition to not only the milk and bread bids, but kind of her recommendations for meal prices for next year. My memo just has the side-by-side comparisons for milk and bread. And as you can see there, milk and bread prices are up anywhere in the 20 to 30% rate. As in the past, we really only have two options when it comes to milk bids. Prairie Farms is who we've used ever since I've been here. Kemp's out of Lamar's has quoted the last 2 years. But you can see their increases are rather significant. The recommendation is to approve the bid from Prairie Farms for milk bids. And then, kind of like when we talked with Matt Basie about construction bids, Darsha sent bids out to 3 different folks, and we only got 1 bid back from Casey's. So Bimbo Bakeries, and then she also had a third one that she identifies in her memo, Pano Gold. So Casey's is, again, since I've been here, out of Sioux Center, has been our provider for our bread bids. Yet again, you can see some pretty significant increases. And we'll kind of dive into the lunch prices here in a little bit, that I'll refer back to what Darsha's quoted in her memo. But if you want to take this first, then we'll kind of circle back around to the meal prices later.
There's no questions, I'll entertain the motion when you're ready.
I will make a motion to approve the milk and bread bids and was recommended by Darsha for 2022-23.
I'll second.
A motion and second to approve the milk and bread bids as recommended by Darsha. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to item 6, consider fuel bids for next year.
Again, you can see what our we received fuel bids from Popke's and the co-op. And these are really just discounts from the pump price for next year. So nearly 15 cents from Popke's for a discount, and then 12.5 cents from the co-op. So recommendation is to continue with Popke's for the 22-23 school year for fuel.
Questions on that? Are you ready?
I'll make a motion to approve the fuel bid from Popke's.
Second?
Motion and second to approve the fuel bid for next year from Popke's. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Item 7, consider fees for next year.
So there's really 5 categories here when it comes to fees. So textbook fees, activity fees, the recommendation is to maintain them as they have been. For the last couple of years, this is what we have charged for textbook fees and activity tickets. This year, we credited some families and some individuals for their activity tickets. Since the year previous, we limited attendance for COVID kind of social distancing. So we would return to the same prices that we had approved actually for the 19-20 school year. Driver's education, I've got a couple additional documents, pages 54 and 55, recommending a $25 increase for driver's education. You can see Jackie's got a nice report that she completes on an annual basis for the state. And so you can see how our kind of profit loss has been for driver's education. The primary driver here for the cost is the per pupil salary for Mark Lutmer. And as you can see, Mr. Lutmer has not had a pay raise since 2018. So I think we're at a point when You know, he's been getting $190 per student. I think he's earned that pay raise in frayed nerves, and, but that would be the primary driver for the increased cost for the fees. Be passing much of that along. You can see at the bottom is the ultimate profit loss on an annual basis. Again, we have not finalized the 22 school year, as we haven't collected all of our fees yet, so we will have an update for that next year. But you can kind of see, we range anywhere from summer of, I guess really 2016, when you put the school year and the summer together. 2019 was, we only had one free or reduced student, but we've had as high as 6 or 7. And so those students, if they're free, they would have no cost. If they're reduced, I think this last year's like $120 or something. $170. So.
So do we just absorb that cost?
Yep.
There's no reimbursement?
No reimbursement. I think it's important to note on page 55, you can see what the other schools across Northwest Iowa charge. Again, Lyon County has the lowest fees for driver's ed, us and George and West Lyon. But most everywhere else, it's over $300. And more places are going to kind of outsourcing their driver's ed to private firms, and that's where you're getting the higher costs, upwards of $375. So we're pretty fortunate to have Mr. Lutmer, and for our kids to do it locally. They don't have to travel, and the fees are significantly less.
And speaking from experience, we're very flexible in our program compared to the schools too.
We're very, what did you say?
Flexible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Mr. Lutmer will drive with kids until school starts. I mean, the classroom time really happens the month of June, but they've got to have 6 hours behind the wheel with him, and that'll happen into the fall. So.
My oldest had to take it from a school, and our program's really, really good for all those
Yeah.
reasons, yeah. And that was good too, it was just different.
The kids really enjoyed Mr. Lutmer.
Oh, yeah.
So, it's good.
Substitute teacher pay is the fourth thing that's
Let's go
listed.
back on that.
Yeah, yep.
How many non-resident students do we have that go through our program?
I don't know. Not
You would
very
have
many.
to ask someone deep in the program, I don't know. We have, each year it kind of varies, I honestly don't know. I don't keep lists, I don't maintain the lists.
That's just someone outside of Rock Rapids or outside of Lyon
school
County, or
district.
outside of the district completely?
Yep.
Where I'm going is, would it make sense to have a higher non-resident fee, because we're toward the bottom? And if somebody wanted to save a little money, all they'd have to do is jump the border, so to speak.
Yep.
I think the timing of ours makes it difficult for outside people to come in. If you had a kid that go through that and he's charged shaking her head, it's a very busy time to commit to driver's ed. That's why I don't think you see a lot of people come here.
I didn't think there was a lot.
I mean, it does happen, but I couldn't
Do
think of
homeschool
like-
kids count as out of district?
Nope.
No,
Which
they're
one?
considered in.
As
in
long
our
as they're
district, so
within the,
Yeah.
yep, their address is Rock Rapids or Dune, they're in the
They're still
district.
considered resident.
Yep.
Mhm.
That's something I can look into for next year and kind of try to get some,
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
if it's insignificant, it's not a big deal.
yep.
And what I was referring to, like George starts theirs right after Christmas, or actually right before Christmas for their waiting list is very short and they look through them really quick. And it's done before summer starts.
And several of our students go over there to get it done
Correct.
before.
So they do they do their driving in the winter too? Or they wait till?
No, he starts right away. If you have your permit, you start driving with them, so someone to get winter experience.
So they do that in the winter?
As long as you meet the age qualification.
My daughter didn't get in, that's why I know that.
Okay.
Does Mark do it on George too?
He drives you around.
Better man than I.
And not just one kid in that car, you usually got
That's a 3 or 4.
3 or 4 of them in there.
My daughter just went through it last year.
So that's driver's ed. Substitute teacher pay, again, we have not raised substitute teacher pay since my first year here, so the 2019-2020 school year. My recommendation is increase that by $10 to $130. Page 56 has what others in our area across, kind of top set is the Siouxland Conference schools, where they're going to be at for next year. The bottom half is just across the rest of northwest Iowa. And then meal prices, as I had kind of referred to. So you can see that first column is where we're at this year, 21, 22, knowing that this year and last year, our families have not had to pay for the cost of the first meal, whether you're eating breakfast or eating lunch. That's been really free of charge. It's only if you're getting a second full meal or a second entree or a second milk or juice where families have had to pay for those meals. So again, based upon the fact that our milk and bread bids are in the 20 to 30% increase. Also in the packet of information from Darsha is kind of our commodities costs, whether it's buying hamburger patties or buying canned fruit. She kind of went through that and said, okay, here are the increases from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. I think the highest one that she had on there was canned fruit and canned vegetables were up like 60%. So it's her recommendation to increase those fees for breakfast, lunch, milk, second meal, all that, for what's in the second column. So the percentage increase ranges, in roughly the 15% range for kids. When I had talked to Andy and Dave with our agenda meeting, they had noted that we've got about $420,000 in our hot lunch account right now for a balance. And so that's where I gave you this second printed sheet tonight. So page 4, I tried to track, okay, where did that $420,000, how do we accrue such a great increase in that account? And so really, you can trace it directly back to COVID. So once we started to be able to get a reimbursed rate from the federal government for every meal, breakfast, lunch, kindergarten, high school, doesn't matter. That's where last year we gained about $77,000, this year $136,000. So all in right now, we've got a $420,000 hot lunch balance. Okay, granted, we just purchased a new steamer. We're probably going to buy a couple more pieces of equipment, like a cooling tray for fruits and veggies, and then maybe another piece of equipment. And then we'll have some increased employee costs. If you remember, we made a wage adjustment to 13.5. We've got a couple kitchen manager positions that's also at a higher rate of pay. So we're going to have some increased costs in addition to the food costs. So a couple alternatives if you wanted to do something less and maybe share the increased costs over a 2-year time frame or a 3-year time frame. If you didn't want to increase by 15% based upon Darsha's recommendation, your alternative is to go up what I have in alternative 1 and alternative 2, which is basically 15 cents or 20 cent increase per meal instead of a 35-cent increase per meal, which was Darcia's recommendation. The other information that's at the bottom of page 53 on the kind of the memo is this year we served 135,000 student meals. So again, if we look at those 135,000 meals and we just kind of calculate the costs based upon what we're charging kids, that's about $300,000. So by raising 35 cents, kind of our revenues are going to be up $45,500 roughly. If you went with alternative one, our revenues are going to be up about $19,000, or we would estimate 6.5%. If we went with alternative number two, your revenues are going to be up $26,000, or about 9%. Again, if you look at our milk bid and our bread bid being in the 20 to 30% increased cost, that's where Darcia really came up with her recommendation for a 35-cent increased cost per meal. But again, $420,000 is a balance. We could eat into that really quickly. I mean, I'm really estimating and guessing what the costs are ultimately going to be once the school year starts. I just know that our costs are probably going to be higher than any rate increase, whether it's 35 cents or it's 15 cents.
So what, doesn't the state have a requirement of where you have to be with your,
Only for adult meals.
only for dollars?
I think it's been like 10 years since they instituted kind of a minimum. They haven't made a mandatory minimum cost per student meal. And that's where, if you look back in Darcia's packet, she gave you kind of a comparison of what other schools are charging for their student fees. That's page 35. Whether it's GLR, West Lyon, Sheldon, she's got some comparables there for what others are doing.
And they can increase our cost on those, on the commodity stuff as it.
Anytime that they
I
want
mean,
to.
throughout the year.
Yep. Same thing even with our milk and our bread bids. If
Yeah.
their rates, if their costs go up, that's what that escalator document in there
Right.
said. They can pass along those costs to us as well,
That's been in there every year.
every
Yeah.
year.
I just get a little nervous if gas prices like keep climbing, like what do you know.
And I think Darcia's recommendation is solid. That's the way she should go about doing it, so I can certainly appreciate that. My line of thinking is a little bit more of $400,000 seems like a lot to sit on. And if we can do something just to help families out a little bit that are paying a lot for gas and just food at home in general, I'd be all for that. I think if we went with, say, if we went with the alternative one here, that's still just for the year, right? And if something really went to shambles, we could always meet and regroup and change it. Prefer not to, but
Yep. I just think that's, I haven't really
Yeah.
paid a lot of close attention to this because we've been positive and
Yeah.
we've obviously doubled the account in the last 2 years because of COVID. It's just something that Darcia's paying a lot closer attention to as we prepare to kind of go back to quote-unquote normal next year.
yeah, we don't know what the crystal ball says, right? We don't know if they're gonna go up another 20% next year. We're in that same discussion. But for me, even if the fund went from 400,000 to 200,000, that's just not, okay. You know, that just seems like a really healthy fund, almost $500,000 for that.
And you look at the revenue comparison between the alternatives, there's really not that much difference. You know, the Darcy's recommendation for a total is an additional $45,000. Alternative one is an additional $19,000. There's only $25,000 difference there, $26,000. So if we think that $26,000 less revenue coming in, that's not gonna make a hill of beans of difference to that $400,000. But to be able to pass along, to keep the cost lower for families, that may make a difference for some people. That's my opinion.
What do you guys think? I would either, I mean, in my mind, if hot lunch breaks even at the end of the year, I think it's a win, quite frankly. I mean, with equipment upgrades and stuff like that. I mean, I think if we're sitting on 400,000 with the way inflation in the economy is, I think it'd be a relief for some families to keep it as low as possible.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right, so you need a motion, right?
Yeah, so I don't know if you want to just take the first four, separate those out, if you're okay with the recommendations, or if you just want to take them all together and say, we're going to do alternative 1 or 2 or whatever.
Yeah, I can say fees were approved and then detail them in all one motion, so that doesn't.
So what's the thought of alternative 1 or 2?
1, and so we're ready for one.
I think 1, yeah.
Okay, fine.
What's our total food costs for the year? Like,
The expenses, if I were to,
I can tell you, I don't know total food cost at this time, it's not, I don't have everything in. Oops. But I can tell you the actual, I line item quickly. Unless Brent had that in part of his.
I didn't do the total.
Yep.
But these, it's more than just, the expenses include the salaries.
Correct.
In addition to the foods.
okay.
So I can do food,
$400,000 roughly in expenses to hot lunch.
And that's with salaries.
that's
what's-
with salaries,
So
correct.
do you have food?
Yep.
Okay.
Just through mid-May, maybe end of May, like I said, I don't have everything from her. I have $170,000.
Just under half of those costs.
And that's just a food line, I probably don't even have all my milk and everything in that, so. And that is not equipment, that's not, again, salaries, benefits, and some other miscellaneous purchase services. So right around 170 for just actual food.
Okay.
So you said total, you think it's around 400,000 expense?
401.
And that doesn't include June yet, which is all of May's salaries. So you're
So-
talking another probably $30,000,
So I think it's.
or $15,000, excuse
Based
me.
on the increase in the milk, the bread bits, the increase to salaries that we know we're gonna do, we're probably easy to say, that's gonna go up by 20%.
I would say conservatively, 20%.
Yeah, so we're talking about another $80,000.
Mhm.
We're gonna increase alternative revenue, or alternative 1 increases revenue by $20,000, call it.
Yep.
So we're gonna eat $60,000. So that's still going to keep us above $300,000 anyway.
Allows us to monitor it, allows us
Yeah.
to make adjustments if we need to make adjustments.
I think they said it's 1 year and you reevaluate next year.
So I think the motion would
Yeah, I
be,
think alternative 1, 12.
so I think the motion would be approve all of the items as recommended with the exception of the meal prices as alternative 1.
So moved.
I'll second.
The motion and second for the fees as discussed. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Number 8, consider annual appointments. Mr. George.
So, just as it's listed there, these are positions that then we would complete for registration or state reports here to start the new fiscal year. Jackie as board treasurer and secretary, in addition to the affirmative action, equity, and Title IX coordinator. Randy Wagmeister as the district's legal counsel, knowing that we also utilize Steve Avery or Allers Law Firm, depending upon the specific interaction that we need to have. But then our investigators, level 1 investigators, Steve Harmon, Jason Engelman, level 2, Kate Gerber, Jessica Harmon, and then level 3, the Sheriff's Department. Suicide prevention coordinators, Kate Gerber for the elementary, Jessica Harmon for the secondary, and then myself as the 504 coordinator.
What does that mean? Sorry, section 504 coordinator.
Yep, so section 504 is federal program for accommodations for students for
Okay.
any reason.
Sure.
So typically it's medical,
Okay.
Student breaks their arm or they need a
Okay.
extended time to get from class to class or
Sure.
more time to take a test or whatever.
Okay.
Sometimes if they don't qualify for an IEP, but they have other necessary accommodations.
Okay. There's space.
Take a motion when you're ready. Take a motion to approve those formal appointments as listed.
I'll say.
Motion and second to approve the annual appointments as listed. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item 9, personnel. If we can take all these together here. Mr. Jordan, you want to run us through?
Yep, so I had sent you Mr. Poletsky's resignation via email, but I gave you a physical copy. Danny Spiker bore, currently a preschool para. And then Kyra Waletich, as I referred to, she'll be student teaching in the fall. And then between the time that she's certified as a teacher, our plans to kind of rehire her and put her back to work after she's done with her student teaching experience. But since she won't be with us to start the year, her resignation's included. The hirings, Sherry Boovy and Stacy Thiner as kitchen managers. Sherry will be in the elementary kitchen, Stacy down here in the high school kitchen. Jolene Metzger as long-term sub for the fall. Lindsay Huseman interviewed assistant, or I should say, middle school volleyball coach for the fall. And then Christy Wright, TLC mentor for a new hire in special education. And then, as we noted when we amended the agenda to start the meeting, Anthony Polsher as district administrative assistant, and then Miranda Murley as first grade teacher. And then our volunteers, kind of our annual appointments for our volunteers, the 3 chiropractors in town as medical assistants, Kristen Rockhill and Dwayne Postma, FFA supervisors. And then Dwayne also as a volunteer football coach with the high school program, and Paul Konichny, who is here tonight, volunteer in the wrestling program. So I included in the packet updated job descriptions for those kitchen manager positions and then the district administrative assistant position as well.
So then where are we at, kitchen help? Like,
So we had 4 retirements, resignations, so we need a couple full-timers and a couple part-timers. Yep.
So none of those have been.
None of these have been filled. So these are current staff members that are gonna be in more leadership roles, knowing that we'll have new staff members. In addition, Darsha has assumed some additional duties when it comes to state reporting and a lot of the free and reduced lunch reports that we have to do, and some of those mandatory things that previously Marla Fries had done. She's really assumed a lot of those. Now she works, her and Leah do a lot of that stuff, but the day-to-day is ultimately, it takes time. And so these folks will be able to hopefully manage the kitchens, and then Darsha will supervise them in addition to the entire staff. But when it comes to kind of the, hey, we need to do X, Y, and Z to get this meal ready, that'll fall on Sherry and Stacy.
High level, you want to run us through the job openings at the moment?
current kindergarten.
Yep.
Additional kindergarten section that you approved last month. Assistant high school football coach.
Mock trial.
I got them right here.
You got 'em? Thank you.
High school, middle school mock trial, prom, assistant football, head boys track, assistant track.
NHS as well, right? Did you say that?
I didn't, because I just nominate you and Mr. Engelmann for that every year, so. But if someone would step up and really want to do it, I
I think we've got maybe one or two people. that
I
might be
think you guys would
interested.
give it up, so.
Yep.
Plus food service, right?
Plus the food service, we're always
Got some
looking
paras.
for, yep, we got some paras that we need to fill with these resignations. We'd love to have another route driver, at least one. If we could get two, we'd be over the moon. But the folks that were driving our route buses at the end of the year said they're willing to continue to drive to start the year. So we're in a good spot. In a perfect world, one more route driver would allow lane Menning to really become the floating sub in case anybody needs a day off, calls in sick, whatever. So that would be our perfect world. If we were able to get two route drivers, then that allows Matt and Todd to just focus on the custodial work instead of them being in a route as well, so.
So, and with Jerry's, with that STEM, and that's TLC,
Yep,
so how, do we have a?
so we have to get that committee back together. Yep, so that includes TLC team and the administrators, and have a conversation about how we want to move forward with that position. You know, does that position maybe become an elementary kind of science lead teacher, much like Bill Allen is the secondary kind of science lead teacher, where it's not a full-time release, but it's someone to collaborate with elementary teachers? Or do we want to look at just kind of revising our whole plan and how do we tackle that? Then when it comes to robotics, we'll advertise, there might be a staff member that's interested. We haven't reached out to Eric Arnold, but he has some robotics and Lego League experience. We just hired him last month as 5th and 6th grade computer science tech ed teacher. So I feel confident that what Jerry has started, whether it's the STEM coaching that he's done or the robotics, we'll have a good path forward once the school year starts for both of those positions.
We get dollars for the TLC leader and
Yep.
that.
Yep,
There's one area that I'm, like, don't completely get is the TLC
you bet.
leadership, and not that we have to discuss it now, but I would just kind of like to understand that a
You
little
bet.
bit better, so I don't know if
Yep,
at some point, I don't know if it's just me or the board or however,
Yeah,
just to kind
whether
of
it's-
understand where that's all at.
I think once that committee gets back together and we have that conversation, you know, whether it's July or August, just a report about the whole program in general and the staff members involved and what their roles are would be a good conversation for us.
Yeah, good.
Okay, there's no more questions on those or current job openings. I entertain a motion for all three of those segments when you're ready.
I'll make a motion to approve the resignations, the hirings, and the volunteers as listed in the agenda.
I have a motion and second to approve the resignations, hirings, and volunteers as listed. All in favor say aye. All opposed? Motion carried. Announcements, dates to remember.
Baseball and softball are our big activities. Obviously, we got Heritage Days this weekend. We'll have the production in the auditorium Saturday night, the Lion King Jr. So everyone's obviously invited to that. You can see the first round of the postseason will be the 1st and 2nd of July for softball and baseball. And then our middle school, their final games are the 7th of July. Our next meeting is scheduled tentatively for Monday, the 11th. As I alluded to, Assembly we'll provide a 30-minute training, kind of this is how you get logged in, this is how you access the agenda, here's how to get all the reports and stuff. Would you guys, does the 11th still work for people? And would you like that training to start right at 7, or do you want to do it before the meeting? Or how do you want to tackle that training?
I will be out the 4th and 5th. Just giving you a little heads up on that whole week before thing. On that month.
You'll be involved in the discussions. We'll try not to blindside you with that one, if that's okay.
No blindside, just letting you know, 4th and 5th, not this month. And then in the future,
So maybe
the August, meeting, that one's the 8th.
Yeah.
So, but otherwise, it's not a big deal.
the board packet might not come earlier, but
On those types of months, correct, but on normal months, that isn't an issue at all.
I think the assembly training's probably better held in a work session, either before or after the meeting, not as part of the regular meeting.
Okay.
In my opinion.
yeah.
Do you want me to just send out a doodle then that has some potential dates for, and we can do it, they can do it via Zoom, so we could be sitting wherever the heck we want to. We don't all need to be in the room together.
It's just a half hour, is that what you said?
It's just a half hour.
How
Can
much,
we just do it right before the meeting or not?
yeah, how much heads up do they need? To schedule it.
So we've got training Monday.
Okay.
So I would like to, I've been telling them the 11th, but if we need to find a different date, then sooner rather than later.
I'm just thinking of if we knew how long the agenda was gonna be, that determine whether it'd be before or after.
See, July agendas are not
I would
typically.
think we could do it that day. I prefer to just do it on the 11th
I agree.
myself.
Okay.
Yep. I do it beforehand, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would too, and then we can use it during the meeting if we.
Even if we 6:15 or something.
That's what I was thinking, to allow us a little bit more than 30 minutes.
I muted any of my Adobe.
6:15 on 7/11.
All right. So last July, we had handbooks, depository, and then Northwest Community College, and 2 hirings. We had 5 new items, new business items.
Okay.
So do we need to start earlier and just have the board meeting later, or I don't care? Doesn't matter to me.
I like 6:15, if you guys are okay with that, if you
I'm good.
can make it. And then
Personally, I'd like to be home earlier, but that's up to you guys.
we'll plan on 6:15. I'll confirm after we have our training on Monday.
Yep, great.
Otherwise, I put the July dates in here. We're planning on registration, kind of online registration, opening the week before Dead Week. So families would have 2 weeks to register online. If they want to do it in person, that'll happen the 1st and 2nd of August. And then football and volleyball camps start that same week with new staff coming back on the 8th with our board meeting in August, tentatively on that 8th as well.
And the work session at 6:15 is just for the training? correct?
Just the training.
Okay, I just need to know how to post it.
I think that's all the events kind of between now and.
Andy, did you comment, or somebody when we had our agenda meeting about the August meeting potentially moving that?
We didn't talk about moving it, I just mentioned that packets wouldn't go out any faster that month because it's so quick, but we can,
Because of the 4th.
no, because of August is the 8th. It's
Oh.
It's
It's as early as you can.
it's only a week anyway.
It's the first
It's
Tuesday.
Yeah,
We were talking about the sports scrimmage.
Oh,
Am
I
I
see
the
what
only
you're
one
saying.
that's impacted there
And me.
for what?
for volleyball?
Is that on August?
That's right, the two of us. So if we could consider maybe, we could talk about it more in July, but
Yeah.
just put that on your radar, that we'll either consider starting that earlier, depending on the length of the agenda, or just finding a different date for it.
Oh, I see what you're saying, there's a 6:30 and a 7:30, yep. It's also new staff orientation that day, so, yeah.
Yeah.
What does a week later look like, the 15th?
If we can go any other night that week, it might be a little bit better than maybe going into that next week, but I'm looking at maybe Mr. Jorth and having new staff come back that next week, or all the staff come back that next
Maybe
week.
like the Wednesday, the 10th or
Mhm.
something.
We can decide next week.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just kind of keep that open, that maybe we wouldn't go out on Monday, but it might be on a different night.
Okay, if there's nothing more on the calendar, entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second. Second to adjourn, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. We are adjourned.
Also left for it, sign me those.
You said that was your anniversary, it was your anniversary.
I
You
know,
knew.
I was like, all of a sudden, I was thinking it like a week later, I was like, I didn't send those this month. She must have not had it, and then I thought, maybe I left you.
We turned around and did it all.
I know, I must have.
We were laughing about it, we said, no, she had some anniversary to celebrate, she'd get out of here. At least that's what I
We
said.
definitely didn't do anything that night. Well, we didn't get out of here till like 10. Oh, it wasn't maybe 10, but it was pretty good.
I just talked over, thank God, that went
Yeah.
So kindergarten, are we still looking into early?
We'll see.
Thanks. Maybe extra since I wasn't.
No, I didn't, I promise.
We can get it done in 6 hours.
Dave might have the worst of it, so we'll see.
Less than 6 hours. Ought to take 4.
Those R, S, T's, and W's.
Wheel of Fortune.
That's cool. Yeah, okay. 2 or 3.